OverChurched podcast for people who love Christ but are struggling with Christians. I'm your host, Justin
and Delicia.
And we're so glad that you chose to hang out with us whenever you chose to hang out with us.
Yes.
It's going to be a good episode. Today, I wanted to talk about the thing that actually causes many people or is the foundations for a lot of people's feeling of being overchurched, and that's church hurt. Mm-hmm. The reality of going to a place that you were trusting would be a place of healing and hope, and instead you find hurt or manipulation or spiritual or relational abuse. Like it's a logical response, and many people are just over it. Like they're just like, I'm over the whole church thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted us to dive into that because I do believe that there is this tension that we have to live in as Christians of recognizing that we live in a fallen, imperfect world.
Yeah.
And that we are broken people trying to display the beauty of Christ. And so there needs to be grace, that we're not going to get it perfectly. I do believe that there is that truth, but there's also that other side of the coin that is also just as true in terms of there needs to be accountability and justice and proactive actions that take place afterwards to ensure that this type of behavior isn't tolerated, allowed, or replicated. Because you see in scripture over and over that oftentimes when wrong was happening, it was called out by a prophet or by God himself. But even in the New Testament, like Paul was very clear, like, hey, like y'all are wilding out there, or Jesus would himself say things. So I kind of want to dive into that. So why don't we first start out from from a shared perspective in terms of like, when was an example that you yourself dealt with church hurt? Because you're now pastoring a church. So how you're, I think, a perfect guinea pig example of like, how do I go from experiencing something horrific or, hurtful in the church to then saying, no, I want to give my whole life to it.
Yeah. I think the very first time, yeah. Okay. So very first time was the church I got saved in. Mm-hmm. Very first time it was, I was 15 years old when I got saved. Mm-hmm. So I knew nothing about church, like as far as like this little world of church, mm-hmm. like I had no background in it. I wasn't like brought up in it, as we had said in previous, mm-hmm. Episodes. It's like, so I took everything that people said to me in the church very like, with weight. Mm-hmm. And I would take that like, like almost like that's Bible. Uh-huh. So I remember getting approached from what we would call like the head usher, but he was like the right-hand man of the pastor. Mm-hmm. And I think back then they called them armor bearers or mm-hmm. something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I remember he approached me, and he did it so gently, so softly, but he let me know that the pastor had told him to basically talk to me and kind of keep an eye on me because of the fact that his daughter was away at college, but her boyfriend was still in the youth group. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, there was something about me that that the fact that I had to be watched or something of that nature. Now he tells me this, and I didn't even know how to respond because I was so shocked.
And you were 15.
And I was 15 years old. Yeah. And I had never dealt with anything like this. Yeah. And so he wasn't trying to tell me he wasn't harsh about it or anything. It was just like a very confusing situation. Yeah. And you could tell he was uncomfortable about it too. Yeah. So I could see that he was uncomfortable about doing it or even talking to me about it. And then even cause I was so confused. I was just left confused. Like I have a boyfriend and why, I have no interest in this boy whatsoever. He was older than me. And I just remember it got even to the point where, the daughter called me. We had no friendship, and she called me telling me that she was concerned about me, and that basically trying to tell me like it was not godly, like to dress a certain way, to be friendly in a certain way, like all these things that could have really messed me up.
Yeah.
But something inside of me,
low-key was like calling you a hoe.
Yeah, like for real.
And you're 15
years old, and
you just met Jesus.
Yeah,
and your first experience at church.
Christian.
Yeah,
and my parents.
And this is the pastor and his daughter, and this was a large church. This wasn't like 30 people.
No,
it was a pretty large church in our area.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And he invited me. I don't even know if my mom knew till this day. Like I went to his office, like, cause he had called me to have a meeting with him.
I don't remember that.
And, like privately, not my mom involved, like the secretary, his little secretary was there. A grown
adult pastor brings a 15-year-old girl in his office to say, stay away from my daughter's boyfriend.
Not in those words. Actually, they were trying to get me to befriend her, like be
awesome. Game
like basically trying to say like that I was like, he feels like God is asking me, like, I need to be around her and like
to learn how to stop belonging to these streets.
I think it was just more of the fact that like you keep making jokes, but I think it was more of the fact of like, it was like, keep your enemies close.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? That's where I felt like it was at or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, so when I think of church, I know like we're talking about like,
but I'm saying that's the first step into like, wait, what is going on? Like, can you imagine that at school? Like if I went to a regular school and some random parent was like, you know what I mean? Like that would never fly.
Well, that happened to me too, but that was a crazy thing. Yeah. That was a crazy thing too, when an adult approached me in like elementary school or whatever. But so I was kind of used to this, like independence, had to speak for my own because I had a single mom and like that she wasn't around all the time. So, and I didn't think as a kid to tell her every detail or whatever. And so in that moment, that really like, I mean, I remember like struggling to think like, is this correct? And
I do. I remember you every time then we were going to church, you would overthink a lot of things like, well, I can't be in the same group as him. I don't want to be around him because I don't want people to assume. So then I remember like we would go and you would have like, all these like, we didn't label it anxiety back then, but essentially like you would be anxious about perceptions because then you were worried about everybody's perception of you. Because if the pastor thinks this and he's telling his, right-hand person and the daughter thinks this and she's in a whole different state now, but she still runs the youth group culture. Yeah.
Like friends, like the friends were hating me. I was isolated for sure. All because I had one passing conversation with this guy. I didn't even speak to him. But I remember the one passing conversation we had.
And I mean, we're going to take an exit and go somewhere else with this, but I just, thinking back now, 15, 20 years later, I think it's crazy because from the last time as we grew up, that guy really, like you talk about deconstructing, before anybody knew what deconstructing was, he did. Yeah. Because he was all in on church and things like that. Yeah. And that sort of manipulative type culture and crazy stuff. Like I remember, because we were still teenagers and he was like a young adult at that point. And he completely was like anti-church, anti-God. Yeah. And he was on fire for Jesus as a teenager. Like he was a role model to me. I was impressed with this guy. I was like, wow, like, he was so talented, so gifted, loved God, was trying to lead his family, like was doing amazing things and saw enough and was in enough stuff to where it totally walked away. And I don't know I haven't seen that guy in years.
But I think that he started following being a young Christian. And if you think a young person, he was following and idolizing his pastor, his leader. Yeah. And whatever his pastor was saying, instead of ever listening to what God was saying over that and what is correct and not.
Because how does he know the difference? The only reason he knew God was because of that pastor. Yeah. And so it went from being like a bridge to like a dependency.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the reason why I bring up such years ago is because I think that can correlate to being adults now. And if you found yourself in a place like you've been hurt some type of way in the church, is like essentially you come in as this new baby, like this new person to your faith, right? And if you think of these adults as if they're just so like they're young and they're new and they're fresh in their walk with God, like how much more do we need to be sensitive to that and leading them in that way and pastoring in them in that way of like, oh, okay, these are new Christians and I need to teach them like, you need to listen to God's voice, know this word for yourself, not mine. Like
not just mine. Yeah.
Not, so I do feel that some people who have been hurt till like right now, today, like being adults, they just took that and you have to recognize like, did I put them in that place? And essentially you did, right? Like
this idolization and this pedestal of like, okay.
Because I don't want to, if we're talking about the process of being a church hurt, I think for me, it was the first step that you have to take is what is it that you are fully in control of and that you allowed?
Yeah.
Because you have what you allow, right? Yeah. So it's like, where did I and this like start listening to this person's voice or these opinions or these things? Why did I allow it to get me to that place? How did I allow it? And essentially it's just because you put their voice over God's voice, right? Yeah. Because even at 15 years old, like being in a place like that and all those things happening, God was holding on to me through that. And I was still wrestling with God because I was like, I don't understand this and it's changing me. But then I'm like, I would have these moments that I would step back and be like, God doesn't want me to like overthink like this. God doesn't want me to.
Or you knew your motives. You're like, that's not where my heart's.
Yeah.
Like they're misinterpreting. Even at a young age, you'd be like, okay, and you didn't lose respect for him as the pastor, but you were able to be like, he was listening to his daughter's tripping. Right. It's all good. I'm not getting caught up in that. Yeah. I do remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to have a truth. And it really took me, it was one of my friends till this day she was older than me and she knew her word and she taught me how to be more intentional with my relationship with God and reading the Bible and knowing that for myself, because she couldn't even really like guide me because she was starting to feel confused and she was wrestling with God with it because she saw what was happening to me. And she took it as if it was happening to her. And she took it, I remember like her getting emotional and her having such a weight. And it was hard because she knew she had to like separate. This is my pastor, but this is not biblical. This is not biblical how they're treating her. This is not what God says. And it was her that I saw like, okay, I'm not tripping because it's hurting even her. And it was in that moment that I could start realizing and recognizing like, okay, I need to hear God's voice and understand his word more than anybody else's at that moment. And being at such a young age and not getting caught up with people and people pleasing.
That's okay. I think, okay, there's the answer. I think that's what I was looking for when it comes to, if I'm in a situation where maybe my integrity is being questioned, my perception is being questioned. My motives are being questioned, my actions, whatever. If any of those are being thrown into doubt, I think the easy thing to do is I'm just going to leave where I can start over and no one knows me and I can, you know what I mean? And I'm not even saying all the time that that's wrong. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I do think it helps. I think what helped you get to where you are today is because you didn't start a pattern of running or avoiding where I'm just going to stop going. You made a decision like, okay, God, if there's something in me that I'm not aware of, like, do I need to be cognizant of like, at 15 and like, am I, you know what I mean? No. Okay. I'm still the boy I actually do have that I like. Is he feeling threatened or like, you know what I mean? No. Okay. then this isn't a me issue. This is a them issue. And I'm not going to allow them to start making me feel insecure and all these other things. We're just going to agree to disagree.
Right.
And from that moment on, we just made a conscious decision, agree to disagree.
Right.
Like, think what you want. We know the truth.
Yeah.
This youth group has still been a blessing for us. We're not leaving it. Like, we're still good because of one person. That's the thing. People allow one person to rob them of, like you said, I had another friend who was encouraging. Then we had other friends and we had other, like we had so many people that we would have robbed ourselves if we allowed one or two people to drive us from a place where there was 50, 70 others who were for it. You know what I'm saying?
100%. We brought it to leaders. We brought it I remember like we got the wise counsel and they were encouraging us like, no, you keep coming. And I just felt like God was like telling me like, this is where you found me. Yeah. Like I'm here, like you're here for me. Yeah. And being that young, I think helped really just me know, like, and us know to not run. Yeah, like exactly. When it's one person or two people, a couple people, a little group, like whatever the case might be. Cause sometimes it could feel like, no, there's multiple.
Everybody hates me. It's like, bro, it's 3 people. Everybody doesn't even know you. You know what I mean? And so we get in our own heads. Yeah. And it's like, again, are we going to let 3 people rob us of the blessing and punk us out of what God wants for us and what he needed? And if it wasn't for that youth group, we could have really been lost and teenagers and single moms and all those things. Like we could have ended up on a whole different trajectory of life if we didn't have that foundation and that circle of people we could go to as we're trying to follow Jesus and not feel like we're the only ones, you know, 100%. Because it is hard as a young person to like, I'm the only person in my family. I'm the only person in my school. And then you really are like one of the onlys, to where if you leave your youth, if you leave a community of faith, just because of the imperfections of a couple people, you'll miss out. It'll rob yourself. Right. Okay. I want to transition because that was when you were like, that was your first introduction in terms of like seeing the brokenness or imperfections of leaders and Christians within a church, right? Yeah. But let's fast forward it to when you're like 8, I think we were like 17, 17, a couple years later, to where it went to where it wasn't just affecting you, the actions of the church, but it was affecting your entire, like it was affecting your family. Yeah. 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 So, and how you actually, it led to being.
Yeah. So again, same church. And, now years later, we're talking about, now my mom goes to this church. She's been coming now. I have multiple family members that go to this church that have been saved.
Because you stuck it out. You lasted long enough for your mom to come and find Jesus. Yeah. Because if you would have left, she would have never came. And that happened early. If you would have ran early, she would have never stuck it out. She would have never, you know what I mean? Like
you rededicated your life.
Yeah. I wouldn't have met, If you would have ran early, if you would have ran the first time it got uncomfortable or disappointed, you
never know how that
could have. You never know the ramification. Oh my gosh, you never know. Okay, so keep going. So you stayed, endured a couple more years, enjoyed also.
Yes, and saw multiple family members then after that, like get saved through this church. So, and of course, because of God, right? So,
but you used the church.
Yes.
You used the imperfect church. Yep.
Right. So then at this time, my mom is a youth leader, and she starts being interested and is dating another youth leader. Now he is younger than her. He's about 10 years younger than her.
Mom's a cougar.
Yeah, my mom is a cougar. And he was a virgin and everything. He was a deacon in the church. He was the like example in the church almost. He was highlighted.
My boy was a hot commodity.
Yeah. And so I remember.
Boy was a sex symbol.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
But it was crazy because
Christian women finding a Christian man is still a virgin and not married and all that.
It was a big thing.
Bro,
it was a big thing, I guess,
especially in church world, man.
Yeah, and like I didn't know it was a big thing. But
you might as well have been freaking Drake at that time in the church.
But
come on.
What's crazy?
And he had a job.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And he had a motorcycle.
Yeah, he had a motorcycle.
Come on.
Yeah.
Man, shout out Austin.
So they started dating, and he wanted to go to the pastor because he had a close relationship with the lead pastor. And he went to the lead pastor and he sat down with my mom as well. and wanted to, I guess get his blessing or something of that nature.
Yeah, they're doing like courtship. It was like they want to be very intentional, and because they served together, they wanted to be transparent. I think all those things.
And this isn't the first time my mom's ever experienced anything like this.
This is or isn't?
This was the first time of her experiencing you don't
need permission to date somebody.
But yeah. But at this time, my mom was a single mom with 3 of us. So me and my 2 younger sisters. So what had happened in this meeting and everything was that the pastor told them both that it was not God's will for him to be with my mom because she had us and she had 3 kids. And basically she's more experienced in life and everything else to say that she's not a virgin. And this whole thing of he God has more for him. And so my mom, I remember coming home from that meeting, so disheartened and so broken. And I mean, these words came from her lead pastor, and she did not know what to do. She did not know how to respond or anything in that moment. And Austin, he's the one that decided and that was a hard place for him because this was the church that he got saved. They saved him at a football game. Then he brought his family who he prayed for and they saw that as a church. And so him and his family were big people in this church for seeing their whole process, right, with God. So it was a huge thing to even him to making that decision they decided to leave. They decided to leave because the pastor gave them the ultimatum of if you're not going to do this, then you can't serve here anymore.
But it wasn't a quick thing. I remember them still serving. It was a process. They didn't just have that meeting and leave. They still kept serving. I remember not knowing about that meeting. Yeah. And I remember being in church on a Sunday morning, and he starts preaching and using this analogy and did everything but give their names. But then he projected into this future story of this, I can't remember the whole thing, but it was 20 years ago. But I just remember him giving the story. There's this young man and he had his whole life ahead of him, and he got with this older woman. And on my mind, I'm listening to the story. At first I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds like Austin and Rachel. Wait, what? Yeah. Wait, that's awesome. And he starts saying how it was how it robbed him of all that he could have done in life because he made a decision to. And I remember I was probably 17 at that time. We were young. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm in there just
it was crazy.
What the heck? Are you? And I remember, and I don't consider myself this feeler or the most empathetic person. You know what I mean? Yeah. When I'm listening for me. I'm not really thinking this applies to anybody else. Right. But I remember in that moment, I'm thinking, I can't imagine, because your mom and Austin were there. They were in that. And I remember thinking are they okay?
It started a spiral.
Crazy.
Then elders in the church were treating them differently. They were being asked to step down from certain things. They it was drastically.
And he had been ordained in front of the whole church before. I remember they gave him a sword. It was one of those churches.
He became a deacon.
Yeah, he became a deacon. They had a whole ceremony. I remember that. I was man, got a legit sword and got knighted and all that. We might have to bring that to Legacy Start.
No. So that was a whole process, right? So yes, it didn't happen. I was just cutting to the chase. But yes, there was multiple things that happened and that people saw and people were but once again, not saying anything.
Nobody spoke up.
Nobody spoke up.
Nobody that I remember or that I'm aware of.
At the time, nobody spoke up. I think people spoke up afterwards. People then eventually later spoke up, but that's when things started spiraling out in this.
But it was too late.
It was too late. Yeah. They had already made the decision to leave. Yeah. But they stood for a while. You are right.
Stood for I don't remember how long, but I just remember it wasn't the meeting. Yeah. It was because I remember your mom, I remember her saying I'm not going to let anybody run me out of a church. Your mom was defiant. She was they're not punking me. God called me here and I'm not here to please everybody. And this is my life. And I'm here. Like,
yeah.
I remember
But I
this
think
day for a minute.
that really helped her and I think that helps people when they don't get brought up in such an environment like that, that you immediately have this kind of grit about you that it's like, but hold up, why are we, what, like, no, like how she was like making that stand. Cause yes, my mom's like super Miss Thug all in herself, but it was just like in this.
Didn't your mom date Tupac?
Stop. We're not even going there. So
Tupac was almost her dad.
No,
just so y'all know, Tupac was almost.
You can't say things like that. We were just talking about taking a test on me, like just to see if my mom's telling the truth. So
that would be crazy. That would be crazy. Oh, that would be so crazy.
But I think that helped in that situation, because I think she really helped give like this backbone to Austin, and like when he's like emotionally struggling.
Like we don't run from nothing.
Yeah. Like what are we doing? Like what should we do?
Yeah.
And what should I do?
Yeah.
And he had things that he had to answer.
Yeah. Cause then it was harder for him. Cause I mean, you're trying to lead your family, but like, this is the only spiritual leader you've ever had.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of that's a lot of pressure. Okay. So 15.
Yeah.
Drama in the youth group almost threatens your church experience to end it. You endure that, make it to 17. Yeah. You see, now it's not even about you, it's about your mom and trying to demonize who she loves and who loves her. And I mean, in everything, how is this unbiblical? Like, this is literally like, what else do you want, church? It's a heterosexual relationship. It's a man who wants to love on a woman. It's literally Hosea. I mean, not to like make your mom something terrible, but just in terms of like,
she was just a single mom.
She's a single mom. Like, so like, give me a biblical example where it says, don't go after someone. Or I think of Ruth and Boaz. Ruth had already been married.
Yeah.
That didn't make her damaged goods for Boaz. Yeah. Like, Jesus came from a woman who had already been married and then was remarried to someone who went after her.
Yeah.
Because he saw value in her instead of leaving her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Never thought about that.
You weren't a pastor yet.
I know.
And I wasn't where I'm at now in life. I wasn't ready. I wasn't there. But my point is, I just think it's so, going back to, you said this in another episode, every single situation that we deal with in church always has to go back to, okay, I hear what this person is saying. I hear what this leader is saying. I hear what this peer is saying. What does the word say?
Yeah.
Like, show me in the Bible where it's ungodly for a virgin man to go after because for all we know, maybe Boaz was the virgin, but we know Ruth wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true.
Dang. I never thought of that either. And I just think it's okay. That's crazy. So then you're 17, but then you see all that, and then eventually your parents do leave. Like, they're essentially kicked out. Like, it's like you're forced out. It's like, when the pastor doesn't want me here, like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean?
When he's preaching over
the pulpit, attacking me and my family, like, okay, now it's like, I'm not being punked, but I'm just going to be wise and like, okay, I'm not going to put myself through, like, I can't even be fed by this man.
Because all the sermons are going to be.
Yeah. But what did that do for your faith? Because, okay, you see that happen to your mom. What happened to you?
I struggled at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, I think then this is where I started, like, they were visiting churches. I didn't know what that was. I never had, it's
the only Christian church you ever went to, unless it was a youth conference or something. Yeah.
So I didn't know that type of, like, okay, so we just go visit churches. Like, so my mom and Austin were doing that with my sisters, and I just wasn't on that. I now graduated. I'm out of the house. Like, so I'm on my own path at this point, because I go sometimes to the churches with them, and every time there would be like somebody trying to give me some like prophetic word about what God has for me. And I just remember having such a hard heart towards it. I couldn't accept anything that anybody said.
Because now your trust is gone. Because the last.
And you're talking about a girl who already has trust and daddy issues.
That's true.
So like
now the church is a trigger.
I'm struggling with God and the church, and just like, why would this happen to my family? Why would this be like, you know?
Yeah.
So, not until people that we knew,
how many years? I would say, how many years did you go where you were like, I'm just over church? Like you would, because I think that's what we say. We kind of identify over church people as like, you still might even show up once in a while,
right?
But you're just doing it out of politeness or routine, but you're not really there to like you have no trust. You have no real desire,
it was just a
routine.
Yeah. It was a routine.
For how many years?
Oh my gosh. The process of visiting churches and stuff, I honestly think it was like 1 or 2. Like,
no, but okay. And then how long before you decided to get involved in a church again?
Oh, that was like maybe 4, could have been 5 years.
Yeah. I think between like 17 and probably 21.
Yeah.
Maybe 20, 21. It was no more.
It was hard getting back into serving again.
Yeah.
Where that was never an issue before.
Yeah. That was favorite part of church before.
Mm-hmm. And I never questioned it. I never thought it was too much. Then you're kind of like seeing everything through this like, what is that called? Like a edged like perspective, because are they trying to take advantage of me? Are they doing too much? Like, are they, what is their motive? What is their, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's things like that I remember feeling and questioning every step of the way.
Yeah.
But thank God for those pastors at that time that they saw me and
So at what age are you now?
20, I think at this point, 20.
Okay.
And I started with like the kids ministry and helping them start a kids ministry and stuff.
Okay.
And then I ended up leaving again because I'm dealing with more personal things now in my life than really with the church. Yeah. But it's all spiraled because of me being on this longer journey
and not really being rooted in a church community to process all this. You were kind of like just floating in and out. So you didn't really have that community you were like, when things got hard in your personal life, you're like, I just got to get out of here.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
so I ended up doing my own thing for a while. That's like probably another 2 years that
it was a year. Cause then at 21 we got married and then you made me go back to church.
But you were going back to church before that.
No, I only went because of you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I left at 7. I did the same thing you did. I left at 17 because I was like, oh, this is crazy. And if you out, I'm out. Like I was only wanting this church because of you.
Yeah, you did. I remember you saying that.
So we left. And then 18, 19, I think I stayed in contact with some of the mentors, youth leaders, because they would, I wasn't mad at them. I couldn't be at that church.
Yeah.
But I remember 18, 19, 20, 21, all of those years of navigating, I didn't have like a church community, didn't have a pastor, didn't have a faith community. So that's when, got involved with a lot of just people.
Yeah.
And then at 21, we finally got married.
Yeah.
And then you were like, we need to go back to church.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But for someone who's on that similar journey, what made you trust? It was John and Kai Butcher. What made you trust them again? Because they came from the church that hurt us, that hurt you.
Yeah.
It's funny. None of that stuff had anything to do with me.
No,
but I was so upset that they would treat somebody I loved and people I love that way that I left too. And I think that's another thing we see with people that are over church. A lot of times it's because of what they've seen, how they've seen other people get treated.
Yeah. That goes back to that girl that I was telling you about that help. Like she saw me get hurt and I could see it was deeply like she was crying. She was deeply affected by that. Yeah. So,
but I'm just saddened because I'm thinking about, we'll never know the full ripple effect of,
making a choice
of the choices and the hurt that, happens in churches. It affects, it's so many, it could end up being multiple generations, but not just that, it could end up affecting multiple different legacies and lives that indirect, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what made you what made you feel like you could trust them?
The funny part is that this was now the armor bearer that I spoke of like, now he has left and his, and it was creating a rift and everything with them. But I think most importantly, it's because I served on his team and I was an usher. That's where I started in ministry. And I remember that I just remember the feeling of feeling safe with him. Like I remember the feeling of like, he never gave me reason to think otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, and I could see how he treated his wife. I could see how he loved his kids. Like all those things I got to see because he personally got close to my uncle who got saved at in that time frame. My mom, like, so they got really close with
so the relationship.
So it was a relationship. So even though he stood for a while and then he had his whole own thing there, it didn't make us think like they're not for us in that way, you know? So I ended up deciding to trust them because of just a relationship I knew. And I felt like I could at that time. Now they're human beings and they have their own flaws and everything else. But at the same time, they were a godly man and woman that I felt like, okay, let me just try and see. Yeah. And how they stewarded me the first time I left was when I went to LA and decided to take a personal break and just leave for myself. They did that well. Like they did that well at the time. And I just talked with them and they let me know, honestly, like they didn't really agree or whatever, but if I needed this time, they understand. And so I did go. And I left for a period of time. And then that's when we came back, got married and everything else. So the church, I mean, it's happened multiple times throughout that process. So I would just say to anybody really listening is that make relationships with people in order to feel like you can, like you really can't make that decision if you're going to stay within a community or whatever, if you have no relationship with anybody.
Well, it's easier to leave if you don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
You'll make a decision. You just can end up making a premature or wrong decision or detrimental, long-term detrimental decision because you were never relationally invested. And I think that, man, that's the tough part, right? Because the more I love someone, the more susceptible I am to being hurt by them. Yeah. The more I trust someone, the more susceptible I am to being hurt by them. Yeah. But if I don't love someone, I don't give myself an opportunity to be loved back so that I can be healed by them as well. Yeah. Because the same way that relationships make us vulnerable to hurt, they also make us available to healing. And I think that it's amazing that it came full circle because that relationship of where even in the moments where you're like, why is he having this conversation with me? But you could feel like, okay, he doesn't really want to do this. Yeah. He's just trying to. So it's like, you couldn't even be mad at Uncle. We call him Uncle John. Yeah. You're like, I can't even be mad at Uncle John because I know he cares about me. He's just trying to figure out how do I honor my pastor, but also I got this 15-year-old girl who I don't know what's going on, you know? Yeah. And then.
Don't worry. We just have the dog.
It's okay. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. And then on the flip side, it's probably the food you ordered. It's probably your grub.
I'm hungry.
I guarantee it's your food. But I think it's crazy. I think it's awesome that it came full circle because that same couple was there for your healing process as well. Like years later, you needed them for healing when it came to, I can still trust you. Yeah. And I can still, I know I need God and I can't have, it doesn't benefit me to just, I have God, but I don't have God's people. Right, you know what I mean? Right. So anyway, I just think I would just encourage anybody if you've gone through, if you've been hurt by people, we're sorry. Yeah. But we get it. We've been there. Yeah. But we also know that sometimes the same people or similar people that hurt you, you still need people to help heal you. And don't just run because you see the flaws in people. Yeah. Because no matter where you go, you're going to see flaws in people. And honestly, if you're honest and real enough and vulnerable, they're going to see the flaws in you. Right, you stay long enough, they'll see your flaws. But you want people that'll love you through your flaws and that'll encourage you through your flaws and won't give up on you. Now, if you get into a situation like where it's actually detrimental to your family, you're in some like cult and you're like, oh, I got to get out, then get out for sure. For sure. But don't also demonize everyone that still stays because just because you know the truth and it sets you free, there's maybe some people that are still there and they're going to need a safe place. Don't write off everybody that's still there because they might need a place to come down the line when God, changes their heart or opens their eyes to certain things. But that's another thing. Sometimes I think God allows us to be blind to some of the chaos around us,
right,
so we can still get what he needs for us in that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like right now, like you would have been justified at 15. You're like, I'm not dealing with this as a pastor. I'm not dealing with this church crap. Like I'm gone.
Yeah.
But man, I would have never came. And then your parents would have never been able to, you know what I mean? Like so many people would have been missed if you gave up too early.
Yeah.
And then you look at it, even more, there's been other people that, they stayed and you don't have to take up everybody's offense. Like if just because, you do have some friends who love you and were there for you, like, hey, they did that to you, we're out.
Yeah.
There's other friends like, well, it's like what we said, I think in the other episode, there's things that we didn't agree with. And it's like, but God didn't tell us to leave yet.
Yeah.
And also we feel like we can dialogue. We have a different, I have a different relational dynamic. Well, I'm going to talk this out and get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think, man, I just think knowing that you're being led by Holy Spirit, you're not being led by offense or bitterness or resentment or hurt. I just think that's the healthiest way to love, live, and lead like Jesus.
Yeah.
So, man, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah,
and
that was part of it.
Yeah, but I can't believe you're a pastor with all the crap you've seen in the church. My goodness, that's crazy. Any closing thoughts for the fam?
I don't know. I guess in honor of my mom, like, don't let no man run you out. Like you
don't
stay,
let no man run you out.
You stay because God tells you to stay, and you go when God tells you to go.
Come on,
and just let let his voice be the one that you listen
Puerto
to.
Rican Tupac, let them know. Let them know. Well,
we're hungry.
It's time to eat. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, love, live, and lead like Jesus. We'll see you next time.